is the WrestleBread Podcast, bringing you the latest news, recaps, and analysis of AEW and WWE. Get the unique perspective from a wrestling fan of over 25 years. Here's your host, Jaydee.
What's going on, guys? This is Jaydee here, and this is episode 28 of the WrestleBread Podcast. So this is a special episode this week. I'm just simply doing the review for AEW Full Gear, and overall, it was a pretty good show. There were some matches that could have gone to the weekly show versus the pay-per-view event, but overall, this was a very good display of AEW and their talents, their storylines, and everything. So I'm going to start off with the buy-in. So overall, the buy-in started off with this AEW countdown, and I must say it was beautifully done. It was narrated, and the story kind of reminded me of like NFL films or a UFC countdown, and it really went into a professional display of the storylines. For example, they talked about the Young Bucks versus Proud and Powerful, Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega. They did a little bit of Chris Jericho and Cody as well. It went into Priestley and Britt Baker, and then it led into their match. But I must say, going into the first storyline of the Young Bucks versus Proud and Powerful, I like the fact that it gave a reason behind their name, but it also gave them a reason why they're quote unquote heels. They're not heels just because they hate everyone or things like that. It kind of went into their background of how, growing up, they had to deal with like shootings and things like that. They lived in a very rough neighborhood, and they grew up realizing in order for us to get where we need to go, we have to take it. We can't wait for it to come to us. And so, you kind of look at it as like, okay, so this is why they are, going after the Young Bucks. This is why they are who they are. And the promo that Santana Ortiz cut, it was very much, it made it kind of like a baby face. And what I liked about what AEW does, they don't really have like, cookie cutter heels that, you can cheer for the heels because maybe you understand where they're coming from. So there are probably people out there that, understand where Santana Ortiz is coming from, that, you do have to, in order to get to where you need to go to succeed in life, you have to take it. You can't wait for it to come. And people may cheer for it. And what I like about AEW is that they don't punish you for cheering for the heels. Before Full Gear, MJF, normally is a typical heel. He'll talk about, the crowd and things like that, but he's just full of himself and people cheer for it. And, commentary and AEW, they don't punish the crowd for cheering for MJF. Now, I highly doubt people will cheer for him, but I like the fact that they give a reason as to why, Proud and Powerful are who they are. The reason behind their name is because they're proud of who they are. Never be ashamed of who you are, be proud of who you are, and it makes you powerful for that. And I really dig that. I like also, they went into the story behind Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega. First of all, I may be late to this party, but I had no idea Philly hosted CZW. So when they started talking about the, ECW arena and they mentioned, CZW was there, I was like, I had no idea. And the fact that, they had Jon Moxley kind of cut the promo at the ECW arena, or 2300 arena that it is now called, and went inside and he kind of talked about his past as far as dealing with brutal matches. And they also talked about Kenny Omega, when he lived in Japan and everything. I really liked it. I really liked the way that it was set up. And I really hope that for every pay-per-view event that AEW has, they do this type of countdown. It really displays, it really comes off more of a serious feel, more of a sports feel, when you see this type of stuff versus, I am going to compare to WWE, but versus a panel of people just talking about it, AEW showed it, and it makes me very happy to see a different type of buy-in that is not just people sitting around and telling you the story behind these matches, that you're seeing it for yourself and you're able to come across your own conclusion. You're able to determine who you're going to root for, who should win, things like that. And I really appreciate it. So going into the buy-in, we had the match of Bea Priestley versus Britt Baker. We had Taz, Golden Boy, and Excalibur on commentary. This was a good match with the story of an effective heel and face. Bea Priestley, the story between Britt Baker and Bea Priestley. Bea injured Britt Baker, and the code, quote unquote, is that normally you don't want to injure someone. If you do, you typically check up on them to make sure that they're okay, which is not what Bea Priestley did. So Britt Baker has an issue with that. But this was a good match with Britt Baker winning the match. I thought Bea Priestley would win this match, kind of to continue on the rivalry between these two, but we'll see what happens after with this win from Britt Baker, if they're going to continue on, maybe not, but I liked this match because this was a very good display of a women's match. This told a story in the ring. It was somewhat more hard-hitting than a lot of the matches we had seen. Britt Baker won with her submission lockjaw. And then afterwards, Britt Baker went to the back. Bea Priestley was still in the ring, and there were candles and lights displayed on the Titantron. The lights go off, and there was a voice that says, there are 8 million ways to die, or 8,000 ways to die, and I am one of them. And it comes up, and it's actually Awesome Kong and Brandy Rhodes. Now, so we're getting all these vignettes of them doing these weird things, Brandy Rhodes crying and doing weird stuff, and Awesome Kong with hair in her hands. They went down, and Awesome Kong attacked Bea Priestley. We saw Brandy Rhodes with a knife, and I'm sitting here like, is she about to shank her or something? They're about to drink blood. But actually, no, they, for some reason, cut a lock of Bea Priestley's hair. Awesome Kong took a nice big sniff of it, and I realized that Awesome Kong had a bunch of weaves hanging around her waist, so she kind of had like a weave belt. I don't know what the hell this was all about. I feel like they could do without this gimmick for Awesome Kong. It kind of gives me, it kind of throws it back to, I think it was WWE that she did this whole thing with dolls and stuff like that. They could have simply just presented her just wanting to kick everyone's ass. But I'm going to let this storyline play out. Maybe, there's something to all this besides, cutting hair and wearing weaves around your waist. But anyway, the show starts off with the Young Bucks versus Proud and Powerful. This was a pretty good match between these two. Ortiz sold a super kick in a very crazy way. He got super kicked and he started wiggling like a fish out of water and then fell flat on his face. Nick Jackson had gum in his mouth that he went to spit at Santana, but it landed on the floor. Santana picked up the gum, looked at it, and put it in his mouth and started chewing it, which was, of course, disgusting. There were some "you sick fuck" chants off of that. Proud and Powerful won this match, which I kind of figured they would, to kind of continue on with their, Proud and Powerful type of ways. And I felt as though that, the Inner Circle probably would display some dominance with this pay-per-view. None of the members of of the Inner Circle came out until at the end of the match. Sammy Guevara comes down to celebrate with Proud and Powerful. He was vlogging, of course. And then we had, Sammy and Proud and Powerful started attacking the Young Bucks. And then we get the Rock and Roll Express, who went and starting to help out the Young Bucks as well. We had Ricky Morton, who is in his 60s, who went and did a destroyer and then did a tope through the ropes. And I was loving every second of it. I thought it was completely awesome. I knew the Rock and Roll Express still wrestles, but I didn't know to the extent that they were doing these moves. Ricky Morton is a crazy old man, and I love it. It was a pretty good babyface type finish to, a match where the heels kind of went over. Next up, we had Hangman Page versus Pac. Hangman Page won this match. I was a bit surprised about. I was hoping that Pac would win to kind of continue on his dominance, but I guess this is to set up a potential, match or something like that for Hangman Page. Page did a beautiful moonsault to the outside. This was a pretty hard-hitting match, and I'm interested to see where Hangman Page goes from here, what his next rivalry would be. But I'm really hoping that Pac would have been more dominant than what he's been. It would have been more dominant in the upcoming weeks. So maybe AEW Dynamite this upcoming week will explain a lot of the fallout from these matches so that these men actually have a direct path of where they will go after these matches. Next up, we had Shawn Spears with Tully Blanchard going against Joey Janela. This match I felt as though could have went to AEW Dynamite. This really didn't feel like a big enough pay-per-view type match. But this match was set up for within the past couple of weeks or so. Shawn Spears effectively using Tully Blanchard as a distraction and to assist him as well. There was an assistant pile driver to the floor that Tully assisted with. Shawn Spears won this match, which I kind of predicted. Joey Janela kind of seems like a fall guy more than, someone with, more of a serious winning record. But this match could have went definitely to AEW Dynamite Weekly show. The pay-per-view event kind of went longer than what I would have expected. And I feel like it's matches like this that could have simply went to, AEW Dynamite. After this match, we had a backstage interview with Kip Sabian, and he introduced himself as Superbad, I think it was, Team Superbad, and he is now teamed up with Penelope Ford. This could have also went to the AEW Dynamite show. It really didn't do anything for the pay-per-view event. Kip Sabian wasn't in any of the matches, so it felt like it, I guess, kind of to give a bit of a segue between matches or something like that, but they could have easily cut to maybe the commentators for a little bit or did a quick, video package like they did before the next match. But the next match was Private Party versus SCU versus Lucha Bros. The tag team division, I cannot say enough of AEW, is so great. Even though this match kind of started off a bit slow, because, all three tag teams kind of had to, gel together a little bit. It was a bit of a slow start, but once the match started going, it really started to go. This was a great tag team match. Once again, Rey Fenix is not human. I love the Lucha Bros. Rey Fenix, there was a sequence of topes and with each team Scorpio Sky, I think it was, went to do a tope, and Rey Fenix ran across the rope and kneed him in the face. Isaiah Cassidy, Rey Fenix or something like that went to do a tope, but Isaiah Cassidy went and he did a spinning corkscrew over the top rope. And then all that was left was Rey Fenix in the ring. And everybody was like, all right, we know he's about to do something crazy. And which he did. He hopped on the top rope. Then he jumped down to the second turnbuckle to the top rope on the other side and did this crazy, it was like a spinning into a moonsault type of move. I don't even know if there's a name for it. I was hyped over it because I'm like, the commentators didn't announce what type of move it was. I don't think there is a name for that type of move he did. If there is, please let me know, because I felt as though you only see these type of moves in the Olympics or something like that. And then he did another crazy, it was like a springboard moonsault later on in the match as well. This was, like I said, a pretty good match, a good showing with SCU and the Lucha Bros. Private Party really coming into their own. It's very exciting to see not only tag teams who have been around for a long time, but to see upcoming tag teams that show a lot of promise as well. SCU won this match, which I kind of figured since they just got the titles, but they did display that there will be a continued rivalry between SCU and the Lucha Bros. After the match, the Lucha Bros then attacked SCU. It was actually Private Party that was pinned. It was Isaiah Cassidy, if I wasn't mistaken, that was pinned. The Lucha Bro attacks after the match. The lights then go out and the lights come back on and you see two Pentagons. Pentagon and the fake Pentagon then did this Cero Miedo hand signal. And then the fake Pentagon went to attack. Come to find out, it was Christopher Daniels, the fallen angel, who is back. Got a pretty good pop from the crowd. The crowd started to chant for him and everything. And this goes on to show that there will be a continued rivalry with SCU and the Lucha Bros, who I feel eventually the Lucha Bros should definitely be the AEW Tag Team Champions. Definitely down the line. If not, hopefully, well, unfortunately, there's no pay-per-view event for the rest of the year. So hopefully, maybe at Double or Nothing next year or something like that. So next up, we had Emi Sakura versus Riho. The one thing with these two women's matches, there wasn't that big of a build-up. I love the fact that they did this promo package where both women talked in their natural native language, versus having them trying to speak broken English. Just let them speak in their native tongue and give us subtitles. And it really came across like more authentic, and you wasn't trying to figure out, what were they saying. I feel as though, if you're going to bring someone over who English is not their first language, just let them speak in their native tongue when they cut promos. You can do it in the promo package like you've seen. It's not that often that Riho or Emi are cutting promos in rings, so you can do these backstage promos and kind of, give it subtitles. I was slightly disappointed that AEW didn't take advantage of the storyline of teacher versus student until pretty much now. I felt as though they could have really built up the storyline between these two to kind of make you more emotionally invested in this match. Before the match started, Sakura was a bit emotional because, she is going against her student, and pretty much probably because how far Riho has come as well. Excalibur did some great numbers for us before the match. Apparently, Sakura and Riho shared the ring 268 times. And like I said, I felt as though AEW really dropped the ball to really display the story between these two, because it's not that often that you have, teacher versus student type of match. And I felt as though they could have really, took a big advantage of, especially since they really don't have that good of a build up with their women's division. This was a pretty good match storyline wise. This was, like I said, student versus teacher, speed versus power. Sakura was doing I think it was called the Romero special. It was the surfboard, but she was rolling around and kept putting Riho in the surfboard a couple of times. There was this weird spot where Sakura had rolled up Riho, and the ref went down, and when he went down, he hit his hand once, and then he got up and was like, oh, she's being pinned, and then went to count, and he counted for 2. And you see the crowd kind of react, because if you weren't paying attention, you would have seen that, you would have heard the ref had counted 3 times. But a bit of a mix up with that match. Riho won the match with a crucifix into a rolling pin combination. And, Riho continues her dominance of the AEW division. I like the display of Riho in this match versus a lot of the other matches she's been doing. It makes more sense to put over her speed, especially knowing that, this is her teacher, so she probably knows the way that she moves and things like that. But like I said, they really dropped the ball with, building up the story between these two. So next up, we had Chris Jericho versus Cody Rhodes. They displayed the judges that were going to be ringside, which was Dean Malenko and Arn Anderson and the Great Muta, who was really great to see. This match took place on Chris Jericho's actual birthday, his 49th birthday, and the crowd started to chant "F your birthday." And Excalibur was like, "Oh, it sounds like the crowd is chanting "Happy Birthday" to Chris Jericho." I cannot talk enough about the storytelling that Cody Rhodes have put on. The difference between Cody Rhodes in WWE and Cody Rhodes outside of WWE is night and day. WWE definitely dropped the ball on using Cody Rhodes effectively. He is a very, very good babyface. He is really able to tell stories in the ring and outside the ring. I mean, the promo that he cut earlier last week on AEW Dynamite, and the story that he told in this match. He went to do this suicide dive through the ropes onto the outside ramp, and it was a bit of a weird shot at first because Chris Jericho was in the way, and you can tell that Cody hit face first, but you wasn't quite sure if he bladed or not because you couldn't see it. But they showed the other angle, which showed no, Cody Rhodes really hit his face first, doing a suicide dive. I highly doubt that this was on purpose. I feels like this was something accidental, seeing as though that Cody Rhodes really don't do that many suicide dives, that maybe he didn't anticipate because of the ramp being so high up that he mistimed putting his hands down or something like that. But it was a very bad injury that he suffered. The medical staff immediately went in, tried to clear it up. And you could also tell too that it wasn't a blade job, because normally when they blade themselves, they're continuously bleeding. Whereas though in this match, the bleeding eventually slowed up on Cody Rhodes. It could have been because the medical staff went and stopped the bleeding, but normally when they blade themselves, it's so that the blood so they could have the crimson mass, basically, that the blood continuously pour out. So that's why I felt as though this was more accidental than real. Later on, it was, Cody Rhodes got 8 stitches and he had some type of injury to his ribs. I looked it up. I cannot pronounce the injury at all, but apparently one of his ribs was separated from the sternum, and typically when that happens, it's very hard to breathe. And you can kind of see the injury during the match. There was a nice bruise on Cody Rhodes. I think it was on his right hand side. But it really added another level to the match, truthfully, to show that, Cody Rhodes was not willing to give up. This match, the Jack Hager was on the outside. On one corner, we had MJF. In the other corner, Jack Hager. It did a little bit of interference, which the ref eventually kicked him out. Just Chris Jericho, putting into Cody Rhodes. He was hitting Cody Rhodes with Chris Jericho's customized belt. He, did I think it was the Lion Tamer. No, he did the Lion Tamer at the end. He did Lionheart. The moonsault. He really put on a clinic on Cody Rhodes, and Cody Rhodes really wasn't giving up. There was this weird spot when Jack Hager was being ejected from ringside, where Chris Jericho hit Cody with the title and then he laid out instead of covering Cody. Maybe it was due to his injury, but I was a bit confused why Chris Jericho didn't just simply go for the pin instead of laying out as well. But you see, after that spot, Chris Jericho slowly went for the pin, which of course Cody Rhodes kicked out of because of the time between him having to actually pin Cody as well. At the end, Chris Jericho had it's not called the Walls of Jericho anymore, but he had that submission in, and you see MJF threw in the towel, which the crowd immediately reacted to, and the crowd instantly started to boo MJF as well. Some people didn't like this type of ending of the towel being thrown in. Truthfully reminded me, because someone also, and then people started mentioning, well, if WWE did this, it would have been outrage. WWE actually did this. I remembered. It was a match between Bob Backlund and Bret Hart. It was a submission match, and the towel was thrown in by Bret Hart's mom. And it was storyline wise, because this was around the time where Owen Hart was turning on Bret Hart, and instead of Owen Hart throwing in the towel, he went, grabbed his mom, and convinced her to throw in a towel. I had to look up exactly when that match was, and that was SummerSlam 1994, which I should have known because I loved that. I loved the poster from that pay-per-view event. But this worked for this type of match, because I took it as though, and the commentary kind of sold it as well too, that MJF couldn't stand to see his mentor go through so much pain and things like that. There was a lot of heat on MJF for it. You can clearly tell that Cody Rhodes was upset. The Chris Jericho left out of the ring and celebrated with the inner circle. They put him on his shoulders. He grabbed the bottle of the bubbly and celebrated as well. You can tell that Cody Rhodes was upset. MJF was sitting there explaining, I'm sorry. The commentators were saying, hey, he couldn't spare to see his mentor, like that. And I was fine with that type of angle that, they were simply going for, cause he is the biggest Cody Rhodes fan, that he couldn't stand to see his mentor go through so much pain that he threw in the towel type of thing. But then we got the turn that we all been waiting for. Cody Rhodes seemed to have forgiven MJF, and MJF went and gave a low blow and kind of mugged Cody's face into the ground. The heat of hell was on MJF. The crowd booed so badly, and I appreciated the fact that it was just simply a low blow and not a complete beatdown. That all you need is just the one move, and that was it. That's all that you needed, was just a simple low blow. MJF was walking towards the back up the ramp. Crowd booing the hell out of him. There was a fan that threw a full, I guess it was beer or soda or something like that, at MJF and with the cup. I don't know if that was a plant or if it was an actual fan, but you did kind of see one of the security guards start to go after him as MJF kind of walked towards the back. So I'm not quite sure if that was an actual fan or if that was a plant, but the drink throwing was perfectly done, nevertheless, for this type of thing. Now, if it was an actual fan, I do not condone throwing things at fans. Because it's a full thing of beer. Those beers and drinks are not as cheap at those arenas during these events, but this was an effective way to end the match. I appreciated it. And some people really didn't realize, and I caught on to this right away, is that Cody Rhodes, because, it's booking. Let's be serious. This is a booking decision for Chris Jericho to win this match. But you have to understand, Cody Rhodes could have simply won this match and got what he always wanted, and that was a world title. And now that, now I don't know if they're going to do something with the stipulation, if, because MJF, ended the match instead of Cody ending the match, if the stipulation of Cody Rhodes never getting a world title shot again will stand. But you have to really think about it. Cody Rhodes effectively sacrificed his desire to be a world champion to take care of the company. And I respect the hell out of Cody Rhodes for that. Because he could have simply won the title and walked around like Vince McMahon kind of did with the title and boast about, hey, I'm the world champion now, this, that, and the third, and held the title for a couple of months. But I definitely respect the fact that Cody Rhodes, for right now, because I don't know if this is going to lead into this, this stipulation being reneged because it was MJF that threw in the towel. But I respect the hell out of Cody for not taking the win for this match, and effectively, rather than, winning the title, to go more for a storyline versus, winning the title here. So I respect the hell out of Cody for that. So then we go to the main event, or, I guess the after show match with Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega. This was a pretty good match. Some people had issues with it, didn't like it felt like backyard wrestling or whatever like that. I felt as though this match was needed, because of the storyline that these two men put out there. That, the company recognized that Jon Moxley is an unorthodox type of wrestler, and the heat that these two had drew to each other, the company kind of knew that, Jon Moxley was going to, use weapons and things like that. And they couldn't deal with being responsible for whatever Jon Moxley was going to do. And Jon Moxley effectively saying, okay, well, since you felt you're putting me into this box, I'm going to, do whatever it takes to, harm Kenny Omega as much as I can, to the point that you wouldn't want to do this type of match again. And, Kenny Omega, with going, I guess crazy, I guess you can say, with this whole thing with Jon Moxley, that he is willing to do whatever it takes to kind of, make sure that Jon Moxley will never try to come at him again. Let me go over, first I'm going to do a bit of a start match. There was this spot where Kenny Omega did a drop kick over the barricade, which looked so good. But I'm going to go over the weapons that was used in this match. There were beers that was handed to Kenny Omega by fans, which wasn't cheap at all. So I kind of appreciated the fans sacrificing their money for that. There was a barbed wire bat that, Jon Moxley used to Kenny Omega's back. And, these weren't props, guys. These were actual weapons. There was a barbed wire broom that Kenny Omega had, which both these weapons were on display before the match, but the upcoming weeks anyway. Kenny Omega using the broom to sweep across Jon Moxley's back. Of course, the match started off with a trash can and trash can lid. There was a table that was used. There was a table with mouse traps. There was a, long, thick gold chain, that Mr. T probably lent to Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega. And the gold chain was used to kind of quote unquote hang Jon Moxley off of the rope as well. Kenny Omega released the chain because, according to commentary, the blood on his hands kind of made the chain more, he couldn't have a grip on the chain. And I really liked the referee. I forgot his name. I forgot which referee it was, but during the match, he felt stuck because he couldn't call for disqualification. But he knew what they're doing to each other. It's like, what are you doing? Things like that. And he kind of had this look on his face, I can't, call it disqualification. The only thing he can do is probably try to talk some sense into each competitor. There was an ice pick that was used. It was taken out by, Jon Moxley. It looked like he went to kill, Kenny Omega with it because Kenny Omega moved out the way from the corner and the ice pick was stuck in the turnbuckle. Kenny Omega then took the ice pick later on in the match, and I don't know exactly what he did. I guess he was trying to stab Jon Moxley with it, but there was no blood drawn, so he kind of didn't really use the ice pick. There was broken glass that was used, and that was a crazy spot. With the broken glass, Kenny Omega, I forgot which move that they landed the glass on, and then Kenny Omega grabbed Jon Moxley and dragged him across the glass. Put him, I think, in the Boston Crab, and Jon Moxley had to crawl through the broken glass to get to the rope, which I thought that little sequence was very good storyline. Poor ref. I don't know why he didn't think of it, but they kept going for the pin, and he was hitting his hand to do the count, but he was hitting the glass, and you see him kind of shaking his hand off, and it's but he kept doing the count on the broken glass, and it's like, ref, you're going to have to move or something like that. Put on some gloves, which he eventually did. And then we get to, there was also a spot with the broken glass that, to make it look like Kenny Omega was trying to make Jon Moxley eat glass, but you didn't see Jon Moxley spit out glass like you saw with, Jimmy Havoc and the thumbtacks, which I kind of caught on to. Then we got to, both men going up the ramp to the entrance, and you see Kenny Omega call out the Young Bucks and Hangman Page to bring something out. And come to find out, they brought out this giant, now I was calling it a barbed wire bed because it looked like instead of a mattress, it was barbed wire, but it was being called the spider web, barbed wire spider web. Both men went through that, which, goodness gracious, the pain that you can get from that is crazy. There were, AEW staff, the Young Bucks and Hangman Page that had to pull the men out of it. So effectively they were getting barbed wire cuts on them as well. The match continued after that. Kenny Omega did a V trigger through the plexiglass of a stage prop. He also used a stage light as well. Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega then fought through the crowd to go back to the ring. And then towards the end of the match, Jon Moxley started to cut away the apron and expose the wood underneath the ring. There was a series of moves that was done on the exposed ring. Kenny Omega went to go for a Phoenix Splash towards the end, and then Moxley did an elevated paradigm shift, and the ref counted to 3, and Jon Moxley won the match. Unfortunately for Jon Moxley, this does not count towards a win or loss record. So this basically after the match, you see Jon Moxley talking to the camera, cursing and everything, of course. But I liked this match. Some people didn't like it. I liked this match. It displayed enough violence for both men. It didn't feel like me watching an episode of Backyard Wrestling or anything, because there wasn't any light tubes or anything. But it was enough violence between both men because of how much they first don't like each other. They wanted to do a lot of damage to each other. And it was the fact that both men was kind of put to such an extreme point that they wanted to, I guess, kind of outdo each other with the weapons that was being used. Jon Moxley, we all knew that he loves to use weapons and do creative things to his opponents, and Kenny Omega becoming so obsessed with wanting to go after Jon Moxley that, you know, he kind of got crazy, I guess I should say. All in all, like I said, this was a pretty good show. Great tag team matches. The women's matches, both matches could have had more of a build. I didn't mention it as well. Bea Priestley and Britt Baker could have had much more of a build as well than we got in the past couple of weeks. But hopefully, you know, these two women's matches showed a bit of promise that the AEW women's division could grow a little more. This is their weakest part, like I always said, of AEW. But there were some matches that could have been on the weekly show, but overall, this was a pretty good show. I would probably give this show a B overall. Very good showing for their first pay-per-view after the debut of AEW Dynamite. And I can't wait to see the fallout that's coming this week and what's going to happen for their next pay-per-view whenever that happens. I don't know if it's going to be a pay-per-view before a potential another Double or Nothing, or if they're going to do something in February or March or something like that. Very interested to see if they're going to do something around WrestleMania, not really on WrestleMania weekend, but around that time frame, sort of. But I wish AEW nothing but the best. It is a good alternative to WWE. A lot of things that you get with AEW you don't get with WWE, and there are some things that WWE offers that AEW doesn't really offer. But kudos to Cody, the Young Bucks, Tony Khan, and the rest of AEW for it as well. So that's it for the WrestleBread podcast. Thank you so much for listening. A few shout outs. Let me give a shout out to Julian and Rob Bass from the Wrestling Court Podcast and AlternativeMinds.com. Keita and Jay from the Keita and Jay Show. Chris from We Talk Next Podcast. Nando and Larry from the Half K Podcast. And Devin and Hafiz from the Clark Street Wrestling Podcast. The next episode will be coming out this weekend, where I give an overall review for Raw, AEW Dark, NWA Power, AEW Dynamite, and SmackDown as well. Like I had said in the previous episode, SmackDown is coming to Philly. I'm going to see what possible matches they're going to advertise. They really haven't advertised anything for Philly just yet. But hopefully it's going to be somewhat of a good show. If there are tickets, I'm going to look at the ticket prices because I really do not want to spend $50 for a show that could be mediocre. Next week, though, is going to be the doozy for all people who do podcasts and who watch wrestling in general. We're going to have Raw on Monday night. Tuesday is going to be NWA Power and AEW Dynamite. Wednesday is going to be NXT and AEW. Thursday, if you watch NXT UK, or if you wait for the replay of NXT like I sometimes do, you have that coming. Friday is going to be SmackDown. Saturday is going to be NXT TakeOver War Games. And Sunday is going to be Survivor Series. So there's going to be a heck of a lot of wrestling coming out. hopefully I more likely may put my episode out probably Saturday. I don't know. Yeah, more likely I'll put out an episode that Saturday instead of waiting until Sunday. And then I'll probably do what I did this time and release the review of the pay-per-views for Tuesday. But a lot of wrestling coming up these upcoming weeks. So be sure to hop on Twitter and follow me at Jaydee Talks. That's JAYDEE Talks. I normally tweet during Raw, AEW Dynamite, and SmackDown. I'll be tweeting live during the War Games and Survivor Series as well. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at WrestleBread. Be sure to tweet me. Let me know your thoughts of AEW Full Gear. If you liked the pay-per-view, if you liked the way that Cody Rhodes versus Chris Jericho ended, if you liked the match between Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega 2. And let me know your thoughts of the podcast as well. Until next time, guys. Peace.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Check us out at WrestleBread.com and subscribe to WrestleBread on YouTube for more breaking news and JD's opinions.